Jenna had never screamed in her life, not until that night, not until the weight of silence collapsed on her chest like 1,000 bricks. But even then, no one came. No one ever did. She was 13 when it began, though the signs came earlier if anyone had bothered to look. She lived in a narrow, two-bedroom house with a thin roof and thinner walls, in a town where the biggest thing to happen each year was the 4th of July fireworks over the community lake. Her mother, Lisa, was a CNA at the only assisted living facility in town. She worked nights, weekends, and holidays, and came home with aching feet and silent eyes. They didn't talk much, not because they didn't love each other, just because there wasn't enough air left at the end of the day to waste on conversation. Jenna wasn't the kind of kid people noticed. She was small for her age, quiet, with the kind of pale, freckled skin that sunburned even in October. Her school uniform always looked one size too big, her shoes always a few months too worn. But she was bright. She read faster than anyone in her class and kept a spiral notebook of poems under her bed that no one had ever read. She was good at disappearing. People left her alone, which, back then, she thought was a blessing. Then Ricky moved in next door. He was everything Jenna's mother admired. A quiet man, in his early 50s, with a crisp haircut and a fireman's badge still framed above his mantle. He lived alone, had a gentle voice, and mowed his lawn every Saturday before 8. When their faucet leaked, he fixed it. When the porch light went out, he replaced the bulb. He brought over casseroles on Sundays and once bought Jenna a calculator for school. "You're too smart to struggle with numbers," he said, ruffling her hair. It felt like static electricity across her scalp. She flinched, but smiled anyway. He started staying longer. At first it was 10 minutes, then an hour, then entire evenings while Lisa napped before her night shift. Jenna noticed how his voice changed when her mom left the room, how his jokes got slower, how his eyes lingered too long when she bent down to pick up her backpack. He called her sweetheart, baby girl, little angel. She stopped wearing shorts. She didn't know why, she just did. One day, while helping with groceries, Ricky placed his hand on the small of her back and didn't move it for 3 whole seconds. That night, she wrote in her notebook, "He watches me like I'm not even a person." Then she tore the page out and flushed it. When she told her mom, Lisa sighed and rubbed her temples like Jenna had just accused a priest of stealing. "He's just being kind," she said. "Don't be dramatic, baby. Ricky's the only one who's ever been there for us. You think I'd let him around you if he were like that?" Jenna didn't answer. She just nodded and went to bed early. That night, she locked her door for the first time and dreamed of walls with no windows. Things got worse. He'd show up uninvited, claiming he'd just happened to be passing by. He brought her books, flowers, and once a necklace, just because it reminded me of you. She never wore it. He asked why. She lied and said she lost it. The real reason was that she couldn't stop imagining it as a collar. At school, she stopped answering questions. Her grades dropped. Teachers started asking if everything was okay at home, and Jenna said yes, of course. She smiled when she said it. A tight, perfect smile. The kind that no one bothers to question. At home, Ricky began tutoring her, just short sessions in the living room, with her mom out back gardening. He sat too close. Breathed too slow. Once, he placed his hand on her knee and didn't move it until she stood up and said she had to use the bathroom. Later that night, she told her mom again. "I don't like the way he touches me," she said. "It doesn't feel right." Lisa looked tired. Older than she had the day before. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and said, "You're going through puberty, honey. You're sensitive. Ricky wouldn't hurt a fly. But he makes me feel. Lisa held up her hand. Don't say it. I don't want to hear that kind of talk in this house. Don't ruin the only good thing we've had in years. So Jenna stopped talking. She became a ghost in her own home. She tiptoed, whispered, and only cried in the shower so no one would hear. She skipped meals. Her ribs started to show. She scratched at her arms until they bled just to feel something different. Sometimes, she imagined packing a bag and running away, but then she'd remember she didn't even know where the nearest bus station was. The final straw came on a Tuesday night. Lisa was working late, and Ricky showed up with a movie in one hand and ice cream in the other. I figured we could hang out a bit, he said. I have homework. I'll help. I'm fine. He stepped closer. Don't be rude. She froze. He took her silence as permission and sat beside her on the couch. When he placed a hand on her thigh, she screamed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't long. But it was enough. Lisa came home 15 minutes later to find Ricky standing in the kitchen, red-faced, shaking his head. She's unstable, he said. I tried to help, but she screamed like I was attacking her. Lisa turned to Jenna, who was curled up on the staircase, pale and shaking. Why are you doing this? Lisa asked. What are you trying to prove? Jenna stared at her mother. She wanted to say so many things. That she was scared. That she needed help. That she just wanted someone, anyone, to believe her. But what came out was only, I can't stay here. She packed a duffel bag with 2 shirts, a toothbrush, and her journal, then walked out the front door. No one followed her. She stayed the night behind the library, curled on a bench, jacket pulled tight, stomach growling. The next day, she showed up at school, where a teacher took one look at her and called social services. That was how she ended up in a group home. That was how she learned to survive in small, invisible ways, keeping her voice low, her eyes lower, her hope lowest of all. She didn't speak to her mother again. Weeks passed. Then months. She transferred schools. Worked part-time at a diner after classes. Spent evenings alone in the library, writing notes she'd never send, poems she'd never publish. She read obsessively, anything to escape the way Ricky's voice still echoed in her skull, the way her mother's silence burned more than anything he ever did. She never told the full story to anyone. Not the caseworker. Not the therapist. Not even herself, not really. She just lived. One day, then another. By the time she was 16, she had learned to function. By 18, she had learned to pretend. When she saw Ricky's name on a local newspaper headline, "Community hero marries longtime neighbor," she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just folded the paper in half, tossed it in the trash, and walked away. But something hardened inside her that day. Something permanent. Not rage. Not revenge. Just this, a quiet decision that she would never again silence herself for someone else's comfort. Never again trade truth for peace. Because peace built on lies was never peace at all. At 19, Jenna lived in a town no one had heard of, in a one-bedroom apartment that always smelled faintly of burnt coffee and bleach. The windows rattled when it rained, the neighbors fought through paper-thin walls, and the heater groaned like it was dying every night, but it was hers. It was the first place she paid for with her own money, the first key that didn't come from someone else's pocket. She worked at a gas station during the day and stocked shelves at a pharmacy on weekends. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was quiet, and quiet was better than everything that came before. She never spoke of home. When customers mentioned the town she grew up in, she nodded and changed the subject. If coworkers asked why she didn't visit family during holidays, she said, "It's complicated." They rarely asked again. But sometimes, when it was slow and she was alone in the store late at night, she'd sit behind the counter with a styrofoam cup of coffee and stare out the window, watching headlights pass, wondering how many other girls were out there, carrying stories like hers with no one to tell them to. On Sundays, she took long walks to the library 3 miles away. It was quiet there. No one asked questions. She'd sit for hours in the back, where the shelves were dusty and the fluorescent light flickered. It was in that same corner that she started writing again, not just sentences and scraps this time, but full pages. She wrote stories. Not about herself, not directly. But always about girls with too much silence and not enough proof. Girls who screamed into pillows. Girls who ran away and didn't get chased. She didn't post them online. Not yet. Not because she was afraid, she was done being afraid, but because she wasn't sure the world was ready to hear them. Or maybe she wasn't sure she was ready to hear them out loud. Then, one morning, she received a letter. No return address. Just her name, scrawled in blue ink she recognized immediately. Inside was a single piece of paper. "I think about you every day. I was weak. I let someone else tell me who you were instead of listening to what I knew. I still can't forgive myself. I don't expect you to respond. I just want you to know, I never stopped being your mother, even when I failed at it." There was no signature. But it didn't need one. Jenna stared at it for a long time, then folded it carefully and placed it in the back of her notebook. She didn't cry. Not yet. That came later. That night, she opened her laptop and started a blog. She called it Silent Places. She wrote the first post like a letter. This is for the girls who were told they were lying. For the ones who were too quiet, too polite, too scared. For the ones whose stories didn't fit headlines or courtrooms. I don't need to name names. I just need to speak. She clicked publish before she could change her mind. The next morning, it had 7 views. By the end of the week, it had 400. Within a month, strangers were writing to her, long, aching messages from other corners of the country. People who'd never met her but felt like they knew her anyway. She responded to every single one. Not with advice. Not with therapy. Just with presence. You're not alone. I believe you. You are not crazy. One night, a woman in her 50s wrote, "My daughter told me something once. I didn't listen. It's been 15 years. I think I lost her forever. I read your story and saw my own reflection, too late. I'm so sorry." Jenna didn't know what to say to that one. She sat staring at the screen for a long time, then finally typed. It's never too late to be honest. It might be too late to go back. But maybe not too late to tell the truth. She didn't know if the woman ever replied. But it made her think of the letter again, the one she'd hidden behind the old train ticket in her notebook. Sometimes, healing wasn't about forgiveness. Sometimes, it was just about not pretending anymore. That realization didn't bring comfort. It brought clarity. The next month, she started attending night classes in psychology. She wanted to understand what made people look the other way. What made victims question their own instincts. What made someone like her mother stay silent while a monster smiled in her kitchen. She didn't want to forgive. She wanted to understand. It was different. And it mattered. On her 21st birthday, Jenna stood in front of a mirror in a Goodwill dress, holding a single cupcake with a candle stuck crookedly in the center. She sang to herself. Off-key. Quietly. Then she blew it out and made a wish she didn't say aloud. But if someone had asked, it might have been something like this. I wish to never again live a life I have to escape from. 2 days later, she saw them. She had just stepped out of a coffee shop with a stack of printouts for a support group she was helping start, flyers for local women, no cost, no judgment, no questions. She stopped at the corner of the street, waiting for the light to change. Then she heard a voice that dropped ice into her spine. You always liked those frothy things. Ricky. His voice hadn't changed. She turned slowly. He stood 10 feet away, holding a cup of his own, smiling like they were old friends. Beside him was her mother, older now, her face worn in ways time alone couldn't explain. Lisa didn't speak. She just stared at Jenna, eyes heavy with something deeper than regret. Ricky took a step forward. You look good. Grown up. Jenna didn't answer. Didn't smile. Didn't move. You still mad? He asked. Come on now, it's been years. She looked at him, really looked. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel fear. Or anger. Or even disgust. She just felt done. You can lie to her, Jenna said softly. You can lie to yourself. But you don't get to rewrite me. Lisa's lips trembled. Jenna, she started. But Jenna raised a hand. No. You don't get to say anything. Not today. She turned and walked away, the flyers pressed to her chest, her heart pounding, not from pain, but from relief. She didn't look back. Because she didn't need to. Jenna didn't think much about them after that. Not because the memory faded, it didn't, but because there were finally more things in her life than shadows. She had a routine. Early mornings teaching writing workshops at the Women's Center. Evenings running a free trauma group at the library. Some days were hard. Some nights she still startled at creaking floorboards. But she was living in her own life now, not the aftermath of someone else's. She no longer needed to prove anything. And she didn't need to be believed. Because belief, she realized, was a gift people gave too late. Survival was something you did alone, in quiet rooms, when no one else was watching. Still, on cold nights, she sometimes pulled out the letter. It was yellowing now, the folds soft from being opened too many times. She never responded to it. Not because she was cruel. But because some bridges didn't need to be crossed. They just needed to stop burning. On the 1-year anniversary of starting her support group, Jenna stood before 12 women sitting in a circle of mismatched chairs. Some were young. Some old. One held her baby on her lap. Another hadn't spoken in 3 weeks but showed up every Thursday with the same broken eyes Jenna once saw in her own mirror. Jenna didn't give speeches. She wasn't a therapist. She didn't promise healing. She just told the truth. Sometimes, she said, what happened to us doesn't go away. It just gets quieter. Not because we forget, but because we remember on our own terms. One woman cried. Another nodded. Jenna sat down, same as everyone else. That night, she walked home past the pharmacy she once stocked shelves in, past the alley where she'd once cried over a stolen paycheck, past the laundromat where she used to nap between shifts. She paused at the corner, where the bookstore stood closed for the evening, its windows reflecting the night back at her. She saw herself in the glass. Not as she was, but as she could have been, had no one ever made her small. She smiled, just a little, and kept walking. 3 weeks later, she got a voicemail. It was Lisa's voice. She sounded tired. Older. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know. Ricky passed away last week. Heart failure. There's a box here with some of your things. If you want them. Or not. I understand. Jenna deleted the message. She sat down at her desk and stared at the wall for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't feel relief. She felt empty. Then, slowly, she pulled out her old blog draft, one she never posted. She edited the first line. My story doesn't end when he leaves it. Then she hit publish. A week later, her inbox overflowed again. Survivors. Daughters. Sons. Mothers. People who had buried pain for decades now saying, I didn't know I was allowed to say this out loud. Jenna read every word. She still never gave advice. Just space. And in giving space to others, she carved out her own. In spring, she visited the beach for the first time since she was a child. She didn't pack much, just a journal, a pen, and an old hoodie. She sat for hours with her knees pulled to her chest, watching waves roll in and out like a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. A little boy walked past with his dad. He looked back at her, curious. Then kept running. She smiled. No one knew who she was here. No one cared. And that, in its own quiet way, was the most freeing thing in the world. As the sun sank lower, Jenna opened her journal and wrote. I was never crazy. I was never dramatic. I was never broken. I was hurting. And now, I am healing. Slowly. Quietly. Unapologetically. And I don't need forgiveness to keep living. I just need to never forget who I am. She closed the notebook, stood up, and walked toward the shoreline. The tide met her toes, soft and cold. And for the first time in years, she felt clean.